It's a mighty train on a heavy hauling mission. Working across unforgiving terrain.
The worst is to come.
But in order to go deep into Sweden's remote forests, drivers have to overcome treacherous, slippery tracks.
Yeah, I think we're stuck. I will give it another try, but I think we're stuck.
We got stuck in a very, very bad spot and master brand new technology.
Something's wrong with the locals.
All on their own solo missions.
I have a very big pressure on me.
I'm crisscrossing the country to learn how this heavy hauler moves a forest worth of timber on its around-the-clock journey. Sweden is the third largest exporter of pulp and paper in the world. And the top choice for hauling the millions of tons of timber needed is by train. Hector Rail drivers like Anders Pedersen are solo on their missions into the forest. One driver, one train, nearly 3,000 tons of timber a day.
Oh, you're by yourself normally. Yeah, you're in the middle of nowhere, and it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah?
Yeah. I love this job. It's the best job I ever had, and I mean, what's not to love about it?
Logging is one of Sweden's original heavy industries, with trees routinely weighing a ton or more. In past centuries, loggers felled trees with axe and saw, then let the nearest river carry the freight. In 21st century Sweden, the railway is the river. When you're hauling thousands of tons of cargo across hundreds of miles of track, nothing can be left to chance. So it's up to drivers like Daniel to check and double-check every inch of the locomotive. Daniel Persson is hooking up brake lines on the Vectron, Hector Rail's newest locomotive.
The red one is the main line, and the yellow one is the supply line, which help us release the brakes faster.
Hector Rail is adding 15 electric Vectron locomotives to its massive fleet to keep up with the world's demands for Sweden's timber. The 90-ton electric Vectron is 19 meters long, 4.2 meters high, and 3 meters wide. Its engine is powered by 6,400 kilowatts of electricity, enough to operate a typical North American household for over 6 months. On stretches with overhead power lines, the Vectron draws electricity through an extendable apparatus called a pantograph. A transformer steps the voltage down and distributes it to 4 motors, as well as auxiliary systems like fans and cooling pumps. Founded in 2004, Hector Rail has boosted its fleet to over 60 locomotives, so it can haul even more timber to Sweden's largest wood and pulp products maker, SCA. This state-of-the-art pulp mill is huge, and it requires a constant supply of timber. So that puts major pressure and demand on Hector Rail to continuously bring in the logs that feed these giant machines. Engineer Jenny Erlian oversees the highly automated process.
We produce 800 liters of chips each second. It's 600 tons per hour.
Worldwide demand for Swedish wood and pulp is so great that the mill is doubling its yearly production. To keep pace with the mill, Hector Rail has also invested in a new fleet of high-capacity wagons. The custom-built wagons are wider, taller, and longer than their predecessors. With 8 axles, they can hold much heavier loads of wood. 22 new wagons will increase each 600-meter-long train's total capacity from 2,000 to nearly 3,000 tons of timber. The new locomotives and wagons are heading out soon on their inaugural run to collect timber in the remote stockyard of Hoting, and then haul it south to the junction in Forsmo, onto Långsele, Ånge, Sundsvall, and the giant pulp mill in Ostrand. There's so much new equipment that even experienced drivers like Daniel have to adapt.
You have to get used to this. There's a learning curve because the brakes are releasing much faster than the old ones.
Daniel may be driving solo, but Hector Rail's fleet is so sophisticated, it's like each locomotive has an extra driver on board, allowing them to operate the train from outside.
This is literally a remote control, right?
Yeah, this is a co-worker to me. Like,
Right.
I don't have to have a co-worker on the train braking and releasing the brakes for me. I can do it myself with this one.
And you can operate the entire train with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I can apply the brakes, I can demand traction and throttle on the locos, and yeah.
I know it's serious business, but the little boy in you, is it kind of fun? It's like a real life train set.
Well, actually it is. It's like a huge toy.
Right?
Yeah.
A very huge toy.
Yeah. Very expensive, huge toy.
Wow, cool.
Ja, idag extra var föraren på 4:05:90.
First, Daniel must deliver the empty wagons to a new driver before the train rolls deep into the forest 240 kilometers away. As he heads out from the rail hub in Anya, even the smallest change in conditions can have drastic consequences.
Right now, being autumn, when it rains and blows, the leaf sticks on the rail and it gets really slippery.
When leaves fall onto the tracks, they decay and form a slippery residue. This prevents the train's wheels from making effective contact with the rails, causing them to slip and spin. To counter this, each of the Vectron's 4 axles is powered independently. If the lead axle loses traction, it over-revs, and the resulting friction burns off the slick material. Like any car on the highway, the Vectron locomotive is still at the mercy of outside conditions, and rails are slicker than roads.
Well, you're losing power, basically, because the wheels aren't pulling anything, you're just slipping.
Down the line, crews are attacking the problem in force. Johan Mahler leads a small maintenance crew that cleans leaves and other debris from the tracks.
Yeah, the problem is the bark from the trees fall off the trains and then they land on the tracks, and which produces oil. So it's a really slick surface on the tracks. If this was a completely flat surface, nothing would stick and it would be a perfect world for everyone. But all the little pits, all the little scrap marks has this organic matter that causes the train to slip.
A customized spray nozzle on the front of the engine starts the process, with boiling water, steam, and high pressure.
This produces a spray pattern that lies about from here to here, and it cuts the organic matter, the oily, slippery surface, away from the tracks. And we have discovered by trial and error what kind of height and angle and everything that suits us best.
Leaves and other debris can bring even the most powerful locomotive to a standstill.
In reality, you can say that the smallest objects cause the biggest problems.
Daniel's empty train is approaching the branch line for Hoting, where it will eventually be loaded. But the Vectron Loco won't be towing the wagons. They have to be pulled by another locomotive. Despite having the brand new Vectron locomotives at their disposal, here in Longsili, the drivers actually have to switch these out for an older diesel locomotive. And there it is. Daniel has just pulled the empty wagons from Anya to the station in Longsili, on a rail line where, like 90% of the tracks in Sweden, overhead electrical wires provide power to the trains. However, to get the empty wagons to the timber yard in Hoting, they'll travel an old timber route that does not have overhead lines.
So there's no power line up to Hoting. We're going to the woods in the north of Sweden and fetch some timber.
In Longsili, it's a new crew.
Now I take on the battery power on the roof.
Now Bengt Hamlund gets his turn at tugging. He starts by warming up a 56-year-old heavy-duty diesel engine.
From Longsili, Hoting and back, it's gonna go 2,000 liters and it's 250 kilometers.
Keeping these half-century-old diesel locomotives running is a mission in itself. At the maintenance facility in Longsalé, mechanic Jim Lydian knows these machines and the challenges they face.
These locomotives drag a lot of timber and very much.
The two-stroke diesel engines are lower tech than the electric locos. But even after 5 decades of hauling timber, these locomotives are still making the grade.
These engines, they burn a lot of oil because they are very powerful. So you have to check them and fill frequently every shift. They burn up to 25 liters every shift.
The sheer scale of the loads places a massive strain on the locomotive's brakes.
Here's a new brake pad, and this is the old one. And we have to change this pretty often. Now the new brake pads are in and we are ready to go.
Bengt positions his locomotive, and he connects to the train of empty wagons for the trip to timber country.
In this time of year with the leaves and everything, it's really hard for the empty wagons to pull them to Hoting.
Slippery tracks are a big deal for these old trains. Unlike on the Vectron locomotive, the axles are not independently powered. And because the track cleaner is powered by electricity, it cannot be used on the Hoting branch line.
It's very concerned when the heart is beating and you are sanding, and so you must be on your alert all the time.
Without nearly 3,000 tons of timber to hold down Bengt's wagons, the slippery conditions could turn this leg of his journey into a very wild ride. Hector Rail's Bengt Hamland is on a solo mission to pick up nearly 3,000 tons of timber from the far north of Sweden.
The last uphill is the baddest, the worst.
But slippery tracks are putting him behind.
Yes. It's 2 hours from here to Hoting. But if it's really slippery, it can take 4 to 5 hours to come up to Hoting.
Bengt drives the 135-kilometer route from Longsalé under tough conditions. After 3.5 hours, the train rolls into the Hoting timber yard. This load will be a good test for the new wagons. Each one can carry 136 tons of timber. This 56-year-old diesel cannot pull as much weight as the new Vectron locomotives. So the 22 wagons will be hauled out in 2 trains of 11 wagons each.
Now is the first time we are loading these wagons. It's brand new.
With the train now 90 minutes behind schedule, loader Hans Pedersen must scramble to get the logs loaded.
This is the first set of wagons, the first 11 that are being loaded right now. Look at this. You can get a sense of how heavy that load of wood is. It's a complicated process because after he picks up the logs, they can become dislodged within the claw. So he's got to watch to make sure that that doesn't happen and also even out the sides of the logs as well.
For Hans, working in the forest industry is a family tradition.
My son is driving now, the other loader, and I began here with my father in 1984 when I was 16 years old.
Hans and his son Victor have turned loading into a fine art.
You have to take 3 grapples for each of the timber load, and then you have to go around with 2 loaders to secure that the load is safe, so they don't fall off anywhere.
If the logs wiggle loose and onto the tracks, they could be a safety risk to pedestrians, vehicles, and other wagons.
You have to be very careful when you load the train, and so you can fill it up to maximum.
By mid-afternoon, the first 11 wagons are loaded. and Bengt is ready to head out.
Today the tracks are slippery. We must have sand so we can have better traction. Maybe we get stuck in some parts. I hope not.
It could be a tricky 2-hour ride. South of Forsmo, crews are replacing old railway ties, or sleepers.
Ja, det är klämmorna i ordning nu då, pojkar. Passa fingrarna nu då.
If a fully loaded train travels over a decomposed sleeper, the rails can collapse and the tracks can buckle, causing the wheels to skip the rail and the train to go barreling off the track. The repair team has to replace 310 sleepers before the timber trains pass just 12 hours from now.
It's challenging, but I've been doing it now for 4 years. I've probably changed 60 to 70,000 in that time.
Sweden's rail system spans 14,000 kilometers, so these crews are constantly on the move.
The screws in this sleeper are worn out because there are so many curves on this track.
If they weren't replaced,
then they would have to reduce speed on this rail section. The trains wouldn't be able to travel at maximum speed. Otherwise, they could derail.
Ja, ta bort klämman där.
Så då har jag en ny slipers här nu.
the crew still has plenty more work to do. But the work they're doing to replace the sleepers should make the line rock solid for every Hector Rail train.
Jag måste göra det ändå.
Back in Hoting, Hans and his son Victor are still busy loading logs for the next train.
This is now the second set of wagons, the second group of 11 that's being loaded with timber. And after this is all loaded up, this half will be taken down to the station at Forsmo. Got to get out of the way here. And then the entire train will continue on its journey.
Loader Hans must stack wood as quickly as safety permits.
I have a very big pressure on me. The train company gets penalty if we don't have the train ready in right time.
Hans and his son have 4 hours to load the second train of wagons before Bengt and the diesel are back from Forsmo. Meanwhile, 80 kilometers down the track, Bengt is slipping up.
Too many leaves, and then it's too slippery, then we get stuck in the uphills.
His fears are coming true.
Slippery. The wheels are turning too fast. Now I'm sanding.
For safety, Bengt must slow the train down to 40 kilometers per hour.
Now it's flat, and then it's last uphill.
The worst is over, for Bengt anyway. His shift is done.
Approaching Forsmo, then we're leaving the wagons. On track number 4. 4:17,81 inne undan I Forsmo.
Solo drivers must be sharp, so the length of a shift is restricted. Bengt passes the keys to Anders Pedersen, who will collect the second load.
The shift is getting too long. We're not allowed to work for too many hours. It's quite strict regulations about that.
Anders is headed back to Hoting to grab the other 11 wagons, but he has concerns about this leg of the journey.
When the sun sets, the animal starts to get active. They're trying to find somewhere to spend the night.
Not even the biggest moose is a match for this mighty locomotive. Yet with slick tracks and limited vision, it's still a recipe for chaos and carnage.
You're not an engine driver until you can do this. Driving when it's slippery and in tough conditions.
With daylight holding, Hector Rail driver Anders Pedersen has avoided any wildlife encounters. He's arriving in Hoting to pick up 11 wagons of wood.
So our locomotive has gotten back now from the station at Forsmo, and the second set of wagons is being connected together by remote control before it continues on its journey.
With the remote control, Anders does 2 jobs more quickly. Operating the train from outside makes it easier to judge the distances and faster to make connections.
It's important that this airline goes throughout the whole train.
The pressurized connections must be airtight.
Yeah, we can't break without it. We have to be very, very meticulous about checking the airlines. If you have very loose couplings, they can snap. Now this is brand new wagons, so I expect them to be all right. But you check all of these things, like these handles. If they are bent and out of place, they can catch a platform or something. That could be potentially very, very dangerous.
As a solo driver, Anders must inspect and shunt the entire load by himself. So the remote control system is an essential tool.
This is forward, backwards. This is only brake on the engine. This is brake on all of the train. I check if the brakes are fully disengaging and engaging at will with the remote control. There's a slight delay on a train like this, so it takes a while before it disengages. Ah, there we go.
The train loaded and ready to go, Anders heads off, leaving the yard in Hoting down towards the train junction in Forsmo.
These are monster wagons.
Farther south, maintenance crews are hard at work.
Over here we have, as I told you earlier, the laser camera that's measuring the rails beneath.
Extremes of weather and 1 million tons of yearly freight take a 4-season toll on Sweden's railway tracks. Track inspector Jonas Wikström has a specialized locomotive that can spot problems invisible to the human eye.
It's very precise. The system on this machine can do it in speeds about 100 kilometers an hour, and we still have a tolerance that's less than 1 millimeter.
If there's the slightest imperfection in the track, this super loco will detect it. It's the ideal test because the train analyzes any defective bends electronically. Lasers and cameras beneath the train emit waves that detect minuscule and major distortions in the steel rails, while also identifying worn and deformed tracks.
Track geometry must align with the train's suspension so that the train can go on the track. So they know when ahead in time they need to do maintenance work or when the tracks needs to be replaced.
Heavy cargo trains place the most stress on the tracks.
If we find critical faults, it's usually a manned team going out with a smaller amount of equipment just to make the tracks safe to use again.
While Jonas flags problem areas that need repairs, Anders can feel his train straining under the massive load. And there are more challenges. At dusk, the light is fading and the leaves still stick to the old tracks.
That's a usual misconception that snow and ice would be the worst conditions to drive, but actually it's when the leaf sits on top of the track. That is ultra slippery, and then it's the darkness, and when all the animal gets active, you know, and the steep hills, all these things together makes this job quite tricky.
200 kilometers away on a stretch of faulty track, repair crews need to fix the problem before the timber train passes over.
An ultrasound train went over these tracks and detected defects inside the rail.
Anton Svensson's track repair team has to identify the faulty rail and take precise measurements. In 3 hours, Anders and his nearly 3,000-ton load are coming through.
We have to loosen the rail before we can change it out. We've got to hurry because a train is coming soon.
Leif Oscarsson ensures crews have the tools needed for trackside surgery. like saws and welding torches.
They have to replace the rail, and after that they have to do 2 welding marks.
It's a labor-intensive process.
Because the steel is very hard. So it's a special way to welding the rail.
First, they weld the joint at the base of the 2 rails. Then they weld the gap up towards the top.
The problem with this rail is that inside the rail there is a damage. When it's cold weather, this damage can make the rail breaking, and that's not good.
In Sweden's timber belt, they log and haul wood in weather that can be as cold as minus 20 degrees Celsius. And snow can be on the ground for up to 6 months of the year.
If it is cold in Sweden in the winter and it came a train, the rail can broken.
With the new rail welded into place, the grinder puts a final polish on the joint. Then it's off to the next problem area. Meanwhile, driver Anders Pettersson is hauling the second load of almost 1,500 tons of timber up and down the hills from Hoting to Forsmo.
What are the big challenges on this part of the route?
You want to conserve the energy and don't brake unnecessarily and go with high speed into the steep hills, you know.
Anders has never driven this route with these wagons, so he's still getting used to how their brakes work.
That's why it's quite difficult to drive these trains, because you have to really think ahead.
Hitting the brakes on a train triggers a chain reaction down its length. While driving, the full pressure in the air hose means the brakes are released. When Anders needs to stop, he hits the brakes, which cuts air pressure along the 300 meters of hose. But it takes time for the pressure to drop and the brakes to activate.
I mean, it could take up to like 20 to 30 seconds to release the brakes. If your average car would do that, it would be just horrible to drive.
On flat terrain, it can take up to 700 meters for the train to stop, so wild animals are always a concern.
This time of night, all the animals start to looking for somewhere to spend the night, and it's the hunting season, so the animals are more stressed and moving around a lot more than what's normal.
Anders reacts as fast as possible.
It's quite common that you see moose and reindeers, and I actually hit a bear once. That was bad.
As darkness falls on this remote branch line, reaction time drops further still.
Yeah, this is as bad as it gets, actually. The worst slopes, lots of animals, old trains, old engines, you know, so it's a little bit challenging, yes.
There's another 40 kilometers to Forsmo, and a big animal could still surprise Anders.
The worst is to come.
Anders Pettersson eases the second train load of timber towards Forsmo to rendezvous with his colleague, Lena Erd, at the branch line. At night, the humidity increases, making rails slicker.
The worst is to come.
He scans the track ahead for signs of wildlife, but the headlamp can only see so far.
You brake and you hope that they will start moving away from the track.
As Anders is nearing the main line where the railway is electrified, Lena is way ahead of him. She's connecting 2 electric locomotives to the 11 wagons left on the side track earlier today.
We are waiting for another set of wagons, and when they arrive, we'll connect them together.
In the 2 decades since Lena started driving trains, locomotives aren't the only thing that have changed. At the start of her career,
There weren't many female engineers. In those days, here in Ånge, where I started, we only were, I think, 7 women.
Although fully trained on the new Vectron loco, tonight is the first time Lena will drive the new locomotive fully loaded.
So I don't have to check the load because that was done in Hoting earlier today.
Once Anders hands off his 11 wagons, the rest of the train journey is on electrified lines.
The brakes are released. So it's okay now to when they come from Hoting with the other wagons. We can go backwards and connect the wagons together.
Finally, Anders arrives, 2 hours after leaving the timber yard. Much to his relief, no animals were harmed on this journey.
We're done with the diesel today, so I will disconnect it and put it on the left track.
Now it's time to connect the 22 wagons into one heavy train.
The operator with the electric trains will back those wagons up on the one side, pull down, and thus where the train will be complete. Perfect. Like butter.
And reconnect the brake lines.
I'm coupling up the two sets of wagons mechanically by the couple and all the air hoses that has to be connected for the brake to work.
Lena has one last task before departure.
She has to pump air into the system because I left some out, because that's crucial.
She'll take the Vectron and 22 loaded wagons from Forsmo up into hill country, and then through the tunnel in Ragunda to terminate at the rail hub in Anya.
So we will try to drive from the Vectron loco, first time for me, with loads.
Hector Rail counts on these heavy locomotives' muscle to haul its biggest loads. Lena faces 3 hours of slow and steady hauling.
When you have loaded wagons, it's much heavier, so it's more difficult to get up any speed.
She and her Vectron enter the Ragunda tunnel. Bored by dynamite and manual labor over a century ago, it's a tight squeeze. Sweden has a long and proud railway tradition. The Ragunda Tunnel was an engineering triumph of its day. It was built using drills and explosives in 1886, when trains were smaller, shorter, and hauled less freight. Today, heavier, taller trains pose a problem. The almost 5-meter-high wagons risk scraping the ceiling of the 6-meter-high cave.
We have to reduce the speed to 30 kilometers an hour. If we don't have enough traction and power to get up, we have to stop the train.
Lena coaxes her nearly 3,000-ton train load through the cramped tunnel.
I got through the tunnel and up the hill, and the engine was good, strong, nice to drive.
It's almost midnight when Lena's timber train pulls into the rail yard in Anya. The final haul is a short trip of 90 kilometers from Anya to Sundsvall, and then onto the mill in Ostrand. But regulations require drivers to take an overnight break. The next morning, Lena couples her Vectron loco with an older electric locomotive for increased power.
Did you hear that? But then it goes away again.
Lena needs to recouple her 2 locos to the 22 loaded wagons, but the pantograph on the secondary locomotive is not extending to the overhead lines.
So something's wrong with the locos. I will ask Daniel.
The pantograph draws power from the overhead lines, but if it doesn't go up, no power will come down. Driving instructor Daniel assesses the error messages.
Well, the issue is that the main switch isn't working, and the main switch is located on the roof, so we can't fix it.
Varför fungerar det inte?
Even with the power of the massive Vectron locomotive at her fingertips, Lena is facing a major delay. Without a functioning secondary locomotive, this timber train is dead wood. Driver Lena Erd's timber train is stuck in Anya. Until she fixes a fault in her locomotive's electrical system, the mill at Ostrand will be missing its load.
They're waiting for the loads.
So we're supposed to leave really soon for the final leg of the trip, but there's a problem with the locomotive, so they're actually having to switch it out for a new one. And they've got to do it all really fast because that mill down in Ostrand is waiting for their shipment of timber.
The tracks to Ostrand handle many trains.
It's not fun to come to start the shift and the loco is broken, but luckily we have a new loco, so it's only to replace it, but it takes some more time.
One small delay could snowball into a major problem. Lena's delayed departure could conflict with a passenger train on the same tracks. The passengers always get priority, making Lena even later.
Yep. Now we are going to connect the locos and try again.
Driving instructor Daniel diagnoses the problem with the older locomotive's power system.
The train protection system was switched on, but not correctly programmed. So roll-away protection kicked in and stopped the motion. Lena has now shut off the system and restarted the radio.
The problem wasn't the pantograph.
Now it's all working.
The locomotives are connected via an automatic train control safety system, or ATC. The ATC software is supposed to prevent the train from rolling through red lights or going over 100 kilometers per hour. A malfunction accidentally triggered the brakes. By rebooting the ATC software, the Vectron and the secondary locomotive are now back in sync.
Initiera nytt VTB. Dop.
So now we are rolling at last. We've lost almost an hour. Now I have to call train control center. Lena är på Hector. Det står med lok där vi är 133 och vill komma ner till öster och gå mot vagnar.
While Lena takes off, at the Swedish Transport Administration just outside Stockholm, Anders Wallner reacts to train delays in real time.
73 och du återkallar körtillståndet för tåg 865 så får du höra av dig när. It's a domino effect, so maybe they have to wait at the side for other train meetings or passing trains.
While Anders rejigs the track's schedule,
Fjällen.
45 kilometers outside Anya, Lena is entering a hilly area that will test the power of the Vectron locomotive. Across Sweden's electrified rail network, there are 60-meter-long neutral or non-electrified sections of the overhead line. The neutral zones provide a buffer to separate powered areas in case of a blackout. Lena's train must generate enough momentum to glide without electricity through an upcoming neutral section and on to the next electrified portion of the line.
Oh, what happens here?
Just at the moment the train needs to maintain speed uphill,
No.
it unexpectedly slows to a stop.
Yeah, I think we're stuck. I will give it another try, but I think we're stuck.
There's no power. The safety software set off the train's emergency brake again. The glitch between the locomotives was not resolved.
Our only option here now is to back up and take another run out again.
So we're stuck, and actually right now we've reversed the train to the station that we had just passed, and we've had to do that because we got stuck in a very, very bad spot. There's a steep incline coming up, so we've had to pull the train back, and now we've got to try to get momentum to be able to get up that hill with this incredibly heavy load.
Lena and train supervisor Mikael reboot the safety system.
Jag fick nå fel på loket. We will try again to get up the hill.
They need more speed to get through the neutral zone.
I think we'll get the power to get past the section and up the hill. It's a little bit slippery, but I will try to work some speed up here. I can use the sand.
The sand provides traction to stop the wheels from slipping.
We really stopped in the wrong location.
Okay, we're up. Crisis averted. We made it. So now it's downhill. We still have challenges far ahead.
Those challenges are coming up sooner than expected. A passenger train is approaching.
We have to take the sidetrack here and stop and wait there.
It has the right of way, so Lena must slow the train and pull onto a sidetrack.
When passing to the sidetrack, there's a speed limit.
If she exceeds the limit, the ATC kicks in.
If you're still overspeeding, then the ATC system goes in and brake the train automatically.
The other train should be passing at any moment.
And here it comes. We got to get back on track because we're already running late.
Through one trouble zone and into another.
There's a required speed reduction ahead of us because of the construction work on the tracks. So I had to reduce my speed to 40 kilometers an hour just before a great uphill.
This speed limit makes a challenging climb even more difficult.
This is a whole kind of different driving than if you drive some passenger trains, which are lighter and they have more traction per wheel axle.
With nearly 3,000 tons of cargo, Lena doesn't want to slow down. She sands the wheels constantly, struggling to maintain traction.
The ATC system thinks I'm driving too fast when the wheels are spinning too fast. So you have to adapt the throttle and the sand at the same time. The next hill is going to be tough. I think we're nearly 2 hours late now.
And there's lots more track to come. "17 kilometers from the mill at Ostrand, Lena's timber train is 2 hours behind schedule, and now she has to make another stop to change tracks."
There actually isn't yet a direct continuous route to our final destination in Ostrand, so that's why we've stopped here. We actually have to stop the train, change directions, and get on a new track in order to make it to the mill.
The locomotives reconnect at the other end of the wagons to head up the branch line.
So now we are on the other loco and we are starting up and we are getting north.
It's been a longer day than expected.
Due to the loco that was broken, we were off the schedule. Now we are about 3 hours late, so it was a huge domino effect on this train. Yes, this is a final stretch.
At the pulp mill, engineer Jenny Erlian is waiting for the overdue delivery. She's kept extra staff at night to offload the train.
Yeah, it's running a bit late, so we're hoping that we have enough timber on the woodyard so we can keep running the production.
Lena is pushing the train to reach its destination. After repeated delays, the timber train finally arrives at the mill. Parking is tight. Lena must squeeze the long train onto the short tracks available to offload the wagons.
I have to split up the track because they only got 200 meters of track and I have 600 meters train.
She shunts the train into shorter loads. It's Lena's last step to complete the delivery. The mill crew wastes no time offloading almost 3,000 tons of timber.
How do you feel now that we're here at the mill?
Relieved.
In spite of the challenges, the Hector Rail team has delivered another huge load of timber. And they're ready for even bigger loads.
This journey really showed me that our new wagons and our new Vectron loop is really working for this job.
It was a collective effort, from the maintenance teams to the tree harvesters and timber loaders to a new engine and new wagons.
It's fun. It's really fun to break in new stuff.
With veteran drivers, train instructors, and mechanics.
You never know when you go to work what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But we came, yes, and we went.
And we're here.
The tracks are straight, but this journey definitely had its twists. It's remarkable that this train hauls thousands of tons of timber every day of the year, under tight timelines, tough conditions, and plenty of challenges. It's big business for Sweden's economy, and a big point of pride for everyone involved in this operation. And tomorrow, they'll do it all over again.